الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب السماوات ورب الأرض رب العالمين، وله الكبرياء في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. ربنا لك الحمد حتى ترضى، ولك الحمد إذا رضيت، ولك الحمد بعد الرضا. صلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيد الأولين والآخرين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله أمين على وحيه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything we have. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. We're actually drowning in the bounties and favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is hardly anything we can do to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough for all that He has given us. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. We just have to do our best to realize that, to remind ourselves of all the mercy and the favors and the bounties that we are enjoying, and so that we can be more thankful and grateful, both in words, from the bottom of your heart, it comes feeling it, and then in deeds by using what Allah has given you, fi sabilillah. That's how you express, that's how you recognize that this was given by Allah, so I'm using it fi sabilillah. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, I believe we came up with some logic or good answers to the two fundamental questions that should really preoccupy Muslims all the time, and they have been preoccupying Muslims all the time. Just to remind you, brothers, if you are here, please make sure that you don't use your cell phone, because that can void your Jummah. So you're taking the time off and coming here, etc. Jummah like Salah. So like you cannot play with your phone while you are praying, you cannot do it while during the khutbah, same. So the two fundamental questions is why Muslims lagged behind, and I don't think that's still debatable compared to other nations. Other nations are advancing in all fields, and Muslims are lagging behind, and the numbers do not lie. Statistics are very clear here. Unfortunately, it's not only in science and technology and education and economy and industry, but even in manners. Even in manners, we are not really at the forefront when it comes to honesty and work ethics and etc. Our ranking is not really, is not good. And the second question was why all the attempts of reform to close the gap between Muslims and advanced nations have failed. All the attempts of reform to make Muslims community again a model and leading community, why they have failed, even though people were sincere and people put a lot of efforts and sacrifices, etc. And of course, the question more important than even these two questions, which is the conclusion. What does it take for us to come out of this situation and bounce back and then become again a model community and a leading community as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be? I think we came to the conclusion that there are three requirements that need to be satisfied in order for any reform attempt to succeed. Three requirements. If you don't see them satisfied in any attempt, please don't make a lot of hopes, because these are going to turn into disappointments. One is the proper understanding of the deen. Why? Because that will give us the direction, that will give us the standard against which we can compare. We should compare ourselves. That will give us a purpose, it give us our mission. So put everything in perspective. And gives us also the requirements to qualify for Allah's help. Because Allah's help is conditional. It's decisive if you get it, but it is conditional. Quran says this, أَيُّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ ينصركم. So it is conditional. If you support the cause of Allah, Allah will support you. And then if Allah supports you, nothing is going to stop you. وَإِن يَنصُرْكُمُ اللَّهُ فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. The question is, how can we support? كَيْفَ نَنصُرُ اللَّهِ. How do we support the cause of Allah? That's what the deen will tell you. Will tell you what you need to do so that you qualify for Allah's help, which will make all the difference. Second requirement is the proper understanding of our history, reading. Why this is critical? Why history is important? Why the physician will ask you about medical history? Because it helps them understand your case, your situation. So history is critical because without it, you cannot understand the reality. You cannot understand the reality without understanding the history. And history helps us to answer the critical questions, which is what? How and why we came to this point. That's the only way we can move forward. We understand where we are and how and why we came to this point. Because this does not happen by coincidence. It did not happen by chance. It did not happen overnight. This idea among Muslims that Muslims went into free fall, everything was fine until the collapse of the Ottoman state is wrong. This is something that we need to get rid of. Nations do not fall like that overnight. It was a long time in the making, and that's what needs to be understood. Third requirement is the proper assessment and diagnosis of the reality, going from the symptoms to the root causes. The symptoms, we all know them, we can see them, but we need to find the root causes. So, all the attempts failed because they did not meet one or more of these requirements. All the attempts of reform failed because they did not meet one or more of those requirements. Actually, I don't exaggerate if I tell you that most of them did not meet any of the three requirements. So it's not only violating one, it's not meeting any of the three requirements. And the dilemma is that what? Is the dilemma that we are still thinking that we are satisfying those conditions. And every time we try to build on that or move forward, and we find things did not work. How many times this happened? We are under the impression of that Islam, Deen, reached us intact, in the same way when we are understanding and practicing Islam, the same way like the Sahaba. You know what? On the surface, that's true. If you scratch the surface, there is no comparison. On the surface, we're praying exactly the same like the companions, and we're fasting, and we are practicing Islam same way. But if you scratch the surface, you find that over there, it's a real jewelry. Over here, it was plated. So it was a layer on top of cheap material. We put a layer of silver or gold on it. They call it plating. There is a difference between real jewelry and the plated jewelry or the fake jewelry. On the surface, they look exactly the same, but if you scratch the surface, there is no comparison. All attempts, they were built on the assumption that the deen has reached us intact. All attempts, they were built on the assumption that our history was all great and perfect till the collapse of the Ottoman state. That makes no sense. That's not true. All the attempts were built or based on this, based on these assumptions. What did we have? We have, number one, we have Islamic movements who said, you know what, the problem is we lost the Khilafah, so if we restore the Khilafah, everything will be perfect. The whole movements are built on this idea that our problem was just the collapse of the Khilafah. So if we manage to get the Khilafah back, everything will be fine. So we have other movements who said the problem is in colonization, as if this colonization came out of the moon or out of the blue. Nobody is asking about why you were colonized to begin with. That's what you need to fix. So the problem is colonization. Rally against colonizations, push it out, liberate the land, everything will be perfect. Now the land was liberated, things were not perfect. Nothing has changed. Then we have, no. The problem is people have deserted the deen. People are not in the mosque. Women are not wearing hijab. People are not praying. People are not, okay, so what's the solution? Let's bring them back. Bring them back to the mosque, fill the mosques, make sure that all sha'air, rituals of Islam are practiced. If you bring people back to Islam, to practice Islam, then everything will be fine. Now we brought people back to Islam, to the understanding of Islam, and nothing has changed. And most recently said, no, you know what? Sorry for the previous diagnosis. Now I think we know the problem is dictatorship. After we solved all the previous problems and nothing was fixed, so it's problem. If we get rid of dictators, everything will be perfect. Now one country after the other, they get rid of dictators. Things did not become perfect. So that tells you how time and again we have very superficial diagnosis or one-sided diagnosis, and then you think you fix it and you find out that. So it is really ridiculous to try again. After all these attempts, it's ridiculous to try again, or it's ridiculous to do the same thing and expect different results, because that's the definition of insanity. Definition of insanity is to do the same thing and expect different results. Last time we determined that our reality, and I want you to listen carefully to this because this can help clarify a lot of things in our mind. Our reality and our history were largely shaped by two events, two turning points that took place more than 12 centuries ago. That can explain, can answer the question that we asked in the beginning. Why we ended up in this situation, why those attempts are not working or are failing. One event took place more than 13 years ago, and we discussed it last time, which is the wrong diagnosis of the Fitna Kubra, or the civil war that happened between the companions. People, unfortunately, they came up with the wrong diagnosis and therefore the wrong solution. What was the solution? We need strong ruler. We'll establish law and order, and we don't care about freedom, and we don't care about justice, we just need strong ruler. You got it. You beware of what you're asking for, you may get it. So that's what they got. They got the dictatorship. So not only they got dictatorship, they legitimized dictatorship. Shar'ana. So we have now in fiqh something called hukm al-mutaghallib or al-mutasallit. It's legitimate. If somebody comes here and impose themselves on us by force, then it's legitimate. We don't have to choose. We have no say. And we lived. What was the result? What was the result? 13 centuries living under dictatorship. So the solution was legitimize dictatorship as long as it brings stability and law and order, and we continued to swing between dictatorship and chaos. So if a strong ruler comes, we submit, surrender, and then if there is some weakness, then we have a power struggle, can be very bloody. Every transition from one family to another was very bloody, like from Umayyad to Abbasi and etc. was very bloody, until a new ruler who comes and establish themselves, and then we submit again, surrender, waiting for some sign of weakness, and then we spent all those centuries like a pendulum. What happened with that legitimizing dictatorship? Hukm al-mutaghallib or al-mutasallit. Equality has gone, freedom is gone, justice is gone, These are pillars in Islam. This is the essence of our deen. Justice is gone, equality, the concept of citizenship was gone. All Islamic political principles have gone. Leadership by consent, transparency, accountability, all they were thrown out of the window. Seeking stability and law and order. Unfortunately, this solution or this stand violates an essential principle in Islam, which is shura. Now, Quran teaches us a lesson. Until now, we are yet to get it. Very powerful lesson, which is the lesson of shura or consultation. How? Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before the battle of Uhud, he consulted the companions. Should we go? They heard that Quraysh is coming to attack Medina. So he gathered, as he does all the time. What should we do? Should we go meet them out? Or should we stay in Medina and fight them in the streets of the Medina? Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the elder Sahaba, they were leaning toward the second option. Staying in Medina and then fight like street fight. Because you know the place. You can be on the roofs, you can be etc. So you have an advantage. Young Sahaba or majority, they wanted to go out. They thought that's like cowardness to stay in Medina. Why? We can go out, especially those who did not participate in Badr. They went out, and you know the result. It was a defeat. It was a victory in the beginning and then turned into a defeat. Quran was revealed after that to tell Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Consult with them. Why? Why Quran was revealed after this? To tell us that this shura is a principle, has to be applied regardless of the consequences. That nobody, if the Prophet ﷺ who receives wahi was still asked to consult after consultation apparently led to a defeat, and nobody after that will come and say, you know, I know better than you, so I'm going to do it my way because I don't need your opinion. Nobody. Rasul ﷺ was asked, and nobody will come and say, you know what, last time I consulted with you and we ended up making bad decision. From now on, I'm going to decide for you. Nobody. Why? Because the principle was enforce it and reinforce it after apparently it led to a defeat. So this idea of legitimizing dictatorship, not only it's a bad choice, it's a wrong choice Islamically. Don't tell me that the shura led to a fitna or civil war, so the solution is dictatorship. No, shura has to be implemented regardless of the consequences. So that largely answers the question why Muslims lagged behind, because they legitimized dictatorship. So it's not a mystery anymore. It's not a puzzle. Muslims are where we are because we, 13 centuries ago, we legitimized dictatorship and surrendered to it for more than 13 centuries, with all the damage that was done to the minds, to the personalities, to the societies, because dictatorship trickles down. It starts at the top, then goes to the family, goes to the school, goes to the companies. It's everybody who can oppress everybody will oppress them. And if you want to know what are the consequences of dictatorship, please read the book by Abdul Rahman al-Kawakibi. It is translated now and it is available online. Arabic and English. Tabaya' al-Istibdad. Booklet, not even book. It tells you what dictatorship does to the people, to the manners of people, to their character, to their minds, etc. And Ibn Khaldun, the great sociologist, what did he say? شعوب المقهورة تفسد أخلاقهم. Their manners will be spoiled if they live under a dictatorship for too long. And that's why Quran emphasized the story of Bani Israel in so many places to tell us that whatever they did was because they accepted to live under dictatorship for very long. So people for all this time, they either surrender or rebelled and then lead to chaos or civil war, and then longing for another strong ruler who will settle things down. So, and when that ruler comes, we accept them and we welcome them. Why? Because in the back of our mind, stability comes first. We are ready to give up all our rights and all our, and then and in the back of our mind, that's legitimate. It's legitimate for someone to be a dictator for us. The second turning point was غلق باب الاجتهاد, or closing the door of ijtihad. Freezing. This is something that inshallah we'll spend some time explaining, because this can help us understand why we ended up in this situation. Just to give you some background, in the second and third Hijri century, Qarn al-Hijri, second and third, in the span of 1 century. Yeah, they called Asr Tadween. That's the era of documentations and etc. It was under Abbasi rule. There was a booming in all fields of the Islamic sciences, ulum shar'iyya. Booming. You will be amazed to know what happened during those second and third Hijri century. You name it. Fiqh, Sirah, Hadith, Tafsir, Tarikh, all happened during those times. Fiqh, biography of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, science of Hadith, Tafsir, etc. I'm going to mention some names. You'll be shocked to know that all of these, they lived in that century. The 4 scholars, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmad bin Hanbal, second and third Hijri century. The 6 people who wrote the books of Hadith, they called them Sihah. Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Nasa'i at those times. All the 6 books of Sihah or authentic Hadith. Sirah, Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham, the source of all the Sirah book, Sirah of the Prophet or biography during that time. Tabari, who started the tafsir and started the great historian during that time. Can you imagine? All of this was produced in the span of about 1 century. That was great. It was something amazing. But again, Muslims, they handled it the wrong way. Why? Rather than keeping this dynamics, keeping people doing what they did, say, no. What we had is enough. So we're going to stop, and this is enough for us until the day of judgment. We don't need any more. We have 4 fiqh, we have 6 hadith, we have, alhamdulillah. We're going to rely on this until the day of judgment. So moving forward, freeze your minds, freeze ijtihad. There is no need. If you find any situation, if you face any situation, go to those books. Go to that work, which was terrible decision, even though it was done with the best of intentions. Now, why people came up, instead of leaving this dynamic to continue, which is the interaction between the fixed text. Keep in mind that the text is fixed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved Quran as is. So the text is fixed. But reality is evolving all the time, bringing new challenges, bringing new questions that were not there before. So those great scholars, they did the job for their time. They answered the questions of their time. They solved the problems of their times. They met the challenges of their time. But they're not aware of the problem that we are facing, the question that we are facing, and the challenges that we are facing. So life continued to evolve. Minds are supposed to continue to evolve, but the text is fixed. So what is the solution? Solution to keep the ijtihad so that this dynamic will continue. Interaction between text, minds, and reality. That triangle should continue to work all the time because our minds are evolving, reality is evolving and changing, but the text is fixed. But the text, we can extract more and more guidance of it. Quran, لا تنقضي عجائبه until the day of judgment. But you can't stop and rely on a work that was done by people like 12 centuries ago or 13 centuries ago. What were the reasons for this decision? Number one, we have enough, because I told you it's a booming. It was really the amount of things that were produced in the span of the 1 century is shocking. So people thought that's more than enough. Second, and that's really another wrong diagnosis that led to the wrong solution, people said, we want to protect the deen from bid'ah, from deviation. Great, we need to protect the deen, but how? Freezing it. I'm sorry, that applies to food. You want food not to spoil? Put them in the freezer. Islam, it's the other way around. The deen, if you put it in the freezer, become irrelevant. Why? Because you fixed in one place, life continued to evolve, then we have the gap. And that's what we have seen. There was a certain time when young people have questions and they come to the scholar, to the Imam of the masjid, they ask, they have no question. There are no answers. The Imam is living in a different time. Imam is not aware of what people are facing. So there were no questions, no answers for people questions, no solutions for people problems. So what happened? People deserted Islam. So it backfired. We want to protect Islam, we made it irrelevant. We made it marginal. Again, we're talking about not the deen itself, our understanding of the deen. So there was a gap between life and the understanding of the deen, and people start looking for alternatives. Because if they don't find the solution and answers in the masjid, they're going to look elsewhere. And unfortunately, Islam was blamed for this. So people say we are backward because of Islam. That's not true. It was in spite of Islam, not because of it. It's because of what we did to the deen, not because of the deen itself. Because when we decided to freeze it, that was the problem. It's not because of the deen itself. So decision again backfired, because the only way to preserve Islam is through ijtihad. That's the only way Islam can keep up, can maintain that capability of guiding people, enlightening minds, answering people's questions, solving people's problems. When you freeze it, you detached it from life, and life is going to continue to evolve. The third reason for this, and that's something that we are still suffering from until this point, people said, you know what, not only we have enough, not only we just want to protect the deen, so let's freeze ijtihad, there is another idea that is very prevalent nowadays. They say those people, those great scholars and the Salaf, they are closer to the Prophet, and they are more pious than us. So our minds are corrupt, so we need to freeze them and rely on their work. So it's not only because we have enough, it's not only because we protect the deen. Now there is a third reason, because these people are more pious, atqa, and they're closer to the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore they know better. So whatever they say, our job is to just read their books, study it, memorize it, reproduce it. That's why we keep reproducing those books, either a summary or sharh and interpretation and explaining, not of the Quran itself, now of the books of Turath or the heritage. Now that freezing was very convenient for those rulers, so it goes hand in hand. Dictatorship, they loved the fact that the deen become frozen. It's not inspiring anymore, and it's not motivating anymore. So it was very convenient for dictators. Not only freezing. Freezing is enough damage, but not only freezing, there was mutilation, tashweeh. How? There are some essential parts of Islam, they were marginalized. Why? Because they are not convenient for those rulers. This idea of justice, this idea of accountability, this idea of citizenship, you have your rights, you choose your leader, you hold them accountable. All of this has to go because it's not consistent with the kind of government. So this has to be marginalized. Your mission of Islah, everything that can inspire people, motivate them, enlighten them, was marginalized. So what was blown out of proportion? The things that does not bother the ruler. You want to do fiqh al-tahara? Go ahead. Just publish as many books as you want about how people make wudu and how people make ghusl and etc. You want to do fiqh al-salah? Go ahead. Publish as many books as you want about how to fix your salah, to make up for etc. Why? Because that doesn't bother them. So we have some part of the deen were blown out of proportion, which is mostly sha'air, rituals, and the personal fiqh. What I can do, what I cannot do. But the social aspect of the deen was totally faded, marginalized. So we ended up with something that was really mutilated or twisted. Because if you come to a nice picture and you marginalize or cancel some part of it or reduce them and then exaggerate or expand other parts, that picture is going to become ugly. You destroyed, you mutilated. Islam is a very nice piece of art, very balanced. Every piece is in exact place. When you come and minimize some parts and expand other parts, you end up with something that is mutilated, and unfortunately that's what happened, and you can see the two are related. Legitimizing dictatorship, freezing ijtihad, minds are frozen. No wonder why we ended up in this stagnation for all this time. That was not obvious for other reasons, because of weakness of the others, because the state was strong, but the society was deteriorating slowly. That's why it collapsed quickly in a free fall, but it was in the making during all those centuries. وَتُوبِ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه. نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فهو المهتد وما يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, inshallah we'll come back and talk about those great scholars, because they were true scholars, how they were a lot of differences between them, and no one was offended or attacked. Why? Because they know that this religion is very flexible. It accepts different interpretations. Inshallah, we'll come back to talk about the scholars of hadith, why we have 6 books of hadith. Some scholars, some accept hadith is accepted by some, rejected by others. Why we have 4 different schools of thoughts, or even more, fiqh. Why they're adopting different methodology? Because that's the nature of the deen. And that's the nature that should have been kept. Unfortunately, we did not take advantage and leverage that flexibility in our deen. Even protecting the deen, the purpose of protecting it from bid'ah backfired. Why? Because when you freeze ijtihad, you open the door widely for bid'ah and deviation. Why? Because the tabi'ah ta'ba al-faragh, void will not remain void, it will be filled. وَنَفْسُكَ إِن لَمْ تَشْغَلْهَا بِالْحَقِّ شَغَلَتْكَ بِالْبَاطِلِ. You leave void, then you will have the bad ijtihad because you decided to stop the sound and the correct ijtihad. You actually did a favor for those. You wanted to protect deen from bid'ah, you opened the door widely for it. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا وعافنا وانت راض عنا. واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها خير أيامنا ومن نلقاك. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا وارحم موتانا وجميع موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إن كنا من الظالمين. صل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.